Good evening, and welcome back to the weird and the wonderful with Strange Bones. And of course, we are going to be carrying on with our usual interesting supernatural and paranormal setup, as it were. And as we progress, we are going to see what we can do to attempt at least to try to solve some of the great mysteries. Dirk Delport, welcome. And we hope that you are having a fine and fabulous and wonderful evening tonight. So, the aim of the event, such as it is, has been to try, at the very least, to find what strange things might be out there, indeed, if anything. And the topic is UFOs and aliens, and we've been going around the different countries and cultures around the world to try, at the very least, to see if there is something interesting to interest us in some manner or form. So I'm just starting off getting the things going. Oh, thank you very much there, Dilly, for the kind likes. Just inviting a few special guests. So we can but it seems some of them are not available tonight. I wonder why. I was very much hoping I could move. Ah, there is the first of them. Welcome to Endless Thoughts. And I'm trying to contact Emperor's son, but it seems that I can't find him to get him on here. We'll have another go as we progress. Because we certainly want to carry on with a topic that began in the last live, and we were beginning to talk about the possibilities, shall we say, of different aliens and what have you, and the topic grew, if you will. Understand that what if humanity does not entirely originate from Earth as such? And this led to the idea, on the one hand, that perhaps we are no more than AI or some kind of a simulation, and that we have the sort of collective human consciousness as a result of the fact that we are in fact not really properly conscious creatures here, but an experiment or some such more from the possible alien interference. And this led to a discussion on the Akashic records. Now, this is going to be particularly important because we need to understand what the Akashic records actually are and why they might be important in that regard. Um, so we need to know a little bit more in order to at least get some information to work with. And I've done a little research from that as well before we can begin even with today's uh, country and culture. But just before we begin, I'm going to remind everybody that on this channel we expect people to enjoy themselves. You may agree and you may disagree. That is entirely acceptable. Oh, huge thanks there for that kindness, Endless Thoughts. So you're permitted to not believe in anything that is said or believe as you feel. You are fully invited to give a great deal of comments if you wish. And of course, we always love it when you like, share, and subscribe to the channel and more in order to keep us going. But before we begin, I do remind you we have one rule only, and that is to say that we don't permit rudeness on the channel. We have a lot of different people from a lot of different cultures and religions that like to come and chat, and therefore we don't permit rudeness in that regard, because everybody has different opinions, and we respect that. We like that. Huge thanks again for those kind likes and gifts there. That's very good of you. But beginning, we are going to start off to try to see what the Akashic records really are. And I don't know, Endless Thoughts, I do hope that the Emperor's son does turn up. I didn't see a way of getting him to join except for a direct message, and I can't seem to connect to him via my cell, which is a bit sad because he was the other one that really had a lot to say that was very, very interesting. And it certainly made the entire live light up along with Endless Thoughts, which was well worth it. But to begin with, okay, so the Akashic record. So the idea behind this is that for whatever reason, there is a collective human consciousness. And the idea of these records are a concept from spiritual and esoteric traditions that refers to a compendium, as it were, of all universal events, thoughts, and experience, past, present, and future. Almost, if you will, a cosmic library of the soul's experience, or even a divine, somehow, collection of knowledge. Now, accessing the records is kind of, at least according to those who ascribe to it, um, the idea is to raise your vibrational frequency or spiritual level in such a way that you can match the frequency of the records and therefore um, connect to them. So now, why would you want to do that? Well, if they are all knowledge ever of every human being ever, it would be a heck of a lot of information, as you can imagine. You would access it through some kind of a meditative or spiritual practice that leads to deep states of visualization, out of body experiences. Um, this would gain insights into your past lives, your current life circumstances, and possibly even know your life's purpose. As Endless Thoughts said, I think the universe is conscious, and each of us is one of the ways that the universe knows that it is conscious. That's a part of it, that we are all linked, we are all ultimately one, and therefore, in some way, part of God in that regard. We are God in a sense, but have broken off and aren't properly connected anymore. Now, if we can access these records, we would therefore be part of the understanding, if you will, of the whole universe. And I would imagine this would do a great deal of good for um, knowing what we're here for, what we're supposed to be doing, and how to do it well, which I think would obviously improve matters in that regard. Um, Different traditions and individuals have slightly different interpretations of the Akashic records, which might indicate that we have different connections to it in different ways, and it may have to do with the specific reason that we are here this time around, um, if you follow that theory. So it would be useful to that bit. So the records are the collective consciousness, or if you will, kind of the mind of God. So you could know the thinking of reality itself. It would tell you about the karmic patterns, past life influences, potential lessons for growth and healing and moving up on that side of things. Now, in the religion known as Theosophy, um, and the spiritual movement of anthro, anthroposophy. God, they love their long words, don't they? The Akashic records are the key to that particular thing. And of course, it started up um, with the Theosophical Society's um, interest, if you will, into what was derived uh, by Helena Blavatsky, who lived between 1831 and 1891, from the Sanskrit. So it kind of comes from Indian philosophies back in the day, but I think it has moved, at least via the Theosophical Society, quite far out of the original Indian understanding of it. Um, Varying people who wrote on esoteric Buddhism and such took the original ideas of akasa and nirvana and so on, and brought it forward into a new and different way. Now, I'm not saying that they were wrong, and I'm not saying that they were right. I'm merely reporting what their opinions were. So it was the idea of it grew until eventually a chap called Leadbeater, in his book Clairvoyance in 1899, um, that was when they were named as something like the Akashic records. That wasn't just a basic theory, but a lot more for that. And there's a certain amount of yoga involved, meditation, um, improving of the self, and of course, with it, the varying forms of yoga. You may not realize it because it doesn't come up outside of the very hardcore sort of Indian groups. But what we call yoga is, in fact, only one form of yoga. There are 8 forms of yoga. Um, you have hatha, prana, kama. Oh, I forget them all off the top of my head now, but they're all different forms of what we could very roughly call action. So your yoga, like prana yoga, is all about your breathing to simulate flow through you, and so on and so forth. There's um, I think it's karma yoga is the physical yoga, which is the yoga we know outside of India. But then there's a kind of yoga which is all to do with moral action and good deeds. Um, there's certain kinds of yoga that has to do with correct religious thinking and spiritual action in that regard. So what we call yoga is really a tiny part of the entire thing, and you have to kind of do all of them in order to raise your spiritual self, in order to access these records and understand the greater truth of the universe. Of course, the Theosophical Society was um, something which grew in a great um, way and got popular and changed to suit people along the way. I believe that at a point, people like Aleister Crowley was involved in it. Um, Certainly, Edgar Cayce, the famous psychic, he was involved in it. He claimed that he was able to actually access the Akashic records. Um, Believe it or not, the musician formerly known as Prince, um, also was connected in some way, and in fact, references to the Akashic records um, are in his album, The Rainbow Children. And of course, we have heard of things like rainbow children, indigo children, star seeds, and all of that. All of that comes ultimately from this idea of the Akashic record. So it's been a great deal of interest for a lot of people through for quite a long time. Um, so there's even a connection in certain comics, believe it or not. Um, so it's had that much of an influence, if you will, on Western society and all over the world. It's been said to be connected to um, Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, that it's been mentioned in um, versions of understanding of the Bible, which was very much a modification of the original. Um, there was a whole connection that Rudolf Steiner used in his journal, the Lucifer Gnosis, which also had to do with that. So there's a great deal involved that uh, can be spoken of um, in terms of this. And from there, what I would very much like to hear from you guys, either in text in the chat, or if you're up for it, we can certainly bring a couple of people into the live if you are interested. But what we are discussing is, what is consciousness really? And is there possibly something like the Akashic records that we could connect to that would improve this consciousness in that regard? I think that it's certainly something that people have said, and they say this is the reason why, for example, uh, when you get like deja vu or something like that, um, it's really you having a brief flash into the records to learn something. Um, Endless Thought says connecting to the motion command information highway, connecting to the one being that is connected to all. That's a pretty good process of exactly what it is. The idea that having connected uh, you will be able to understand where you fit in the flow of reality and where, as humanity, we are supposed to go. Now, here's where it gets very interesting, because um, on the one side, it means that if we are only AI as such, or simulations in that regard, then we're essentially I think you could probably imagine it like playing a video game, like say Skyrim, whereby yeah, you can do all kinds of things. You can do good things, you can do bad things, but your character, while in a sense is you, it's also kind of not. They're there to experiment, if you will. But the real you is, of course, not in the game at all. So all the things done, all the things uncovered or learned or whatever, isn't truly the real you. So you can play it multiple times in order to do better every time and improve your character in that regard. But of course, you could equally say to hell with it and devolve your character, making them worse and worse and worse, um, either just for the amusement of it or because it teaches you something else. I mean, it's absolutely arguable in that regard. So, in that sense, your character is not really conscious, and being not conscious, they don't really have true volition. Now, here's where the big problem comes in, if you will. Without consciousness, there is no morality. Okay? Morality is something which demands choice. And choice can only happen if it is conscious choice. Otherwise, all you have is reaction. Now, I know this is slightly arguable, but work with me and pretend, if you will. Most people would say that animals aren't really properly conscious the way humans are conscious. So they don't truly know right from wrong. I know it's arguable, but pretend that is true for a second. Therefore, if you poke a dog with a stick and it bites you, it's not doing it for evil or malicious reasons. It's merely reacting. So we can't morally blame it for what it does. It's doing what it's doing because it's in its nature and nothing more. And of course, you have that famous Aesop fable about um, the scorpion, and I think it was a dog, in fact, that was trying to cross a river, and the scorpion asks the dog to help him, and the dog says, "Sure, I'll take you across as long as you promise not to sting me." But the scorpion does sting the dog, and both are drowning. And as they are drowning, the dog says, "Why?" And the scorpion says, "I can't help it. It's in my nature." Um, that's really the understanding. In order to have morality, you have to be able to be conscious enough to assess the situation and make a deliberate choice. Um, this is one of the basics, if you will, why um, why would you run a simulation? That's a very good question. To know that, I would assume that you would need to know the mind of God. A simulation is to gather information. Absolutely. A fair point there. Yes. Which implies then, if I may, that our reason for being human is to learn something, to gain enough information that we may learn a something. Yes? So our job is to supply information. Is it to supply information or to gain information? Who is doing the learning, if you will? I suppose that in that regard, um, yes, you have a point. Both we create the information through the simulation, I suppose, which then teaches us. But then, of course, we must ask, um, what is the point of gaining this information? Is this world such as it is merely a training ground for a different one where we will use that information, do you think? Welcome there to Brutus, the Australian Bulldog. I hope that you are enjoying. We're discussing whether or not we're a simulation and what it might imply for us, and whether or not we could access the Akashic records, such as they are, in order to further improve ourselves. The Akashic records being the sum total of all human knowledge and experience, if they exist. That seems to be the big question. And in this regard, the question, I suppose, would be where else are we meant to use what we've learnt? Now, in one of the series, because ultimately we are discussing, of course, UFOs and aliens, if we do not actually originate on this planet, if we are a creation of some alien force, are we an experiment for the aliens to learn? Are we the aliens that have somehow created a simulation here in order to learn? Or are we like mice in a maze, where the information gathered is not for us at all, but for whatever alien thing might be out there? And this is important in our alien examination simply because there are a number of things that we will be getting to as we troll along in our discussions that need explicating. The most obvious being things like how the heck did they build the pyramids in different countries and places, and why, really? How did you get something like the Voynich manuscript or Göbekli, where there are clear things which perhaps shouldn't exist? They defy human understanding or knowledge, and they seem to imply something else is out there, which then, of course, we would need to start to understand, well, if there is something out there, what is it, and why? Because we don't have answers to that as yet. And I think in that way, we need some answers. Certainly, with most of the Theosophical Society, their idea is we are conscious, we are the important one, such as it is, and as such, the idea of getting into contact with these records is to improve our spiritual self. Our bodies are here purely as a vehicle for our soul, which is far greater and needs learning, and we use our bodies and our experience in this world to improve our spiritual self, which, yes, it makes sense. But then again, it implies that we're doing it for a reason that is greater than this world. Are we going to live again in a different way? And that's a hard one to answer. I suppose ultimately the big question that all of these things come down to, whether you're talking aliens, ghosts, magic, whatever, all of it really is different ways to try to answer the ultimate question of all of really, what is the point of life? Why are we here? What are we even here for? So in that regard, it does make it very difficult. Now, one thing that I think, which is in many ways one of the reasons why I dislike eschatology and the teachings of a great many religions in that regard, is that it draws your attention to what comes after. And I kind of believe that that's the wrong view. I think the whole point of life on earth ultimately is life on earth. This is the point, and whether or not there is something after doesn't matter. You ask their endless thoughts, do we need meaning or do we want one? I think we do need and we do want, but we look outside of the place where we are for that meaning. It's kind of like if you want a really good martial arts, it's got to come from the Far East and have some mystical teacher teaching you. If you want great mystic knowledge, it's only from the mountains of Tibet. Nobody stops to think that there might be answers where we are. And I think that is our big mistake as human beings. The whole point of being human is to be human. We are here to be there, and we should forget about the afterlife. We'll deal with that when we get there. What we should do is spend as much time as possible being the best human being that we are capable of being. This is the point, right here, not somewhere else. Now, of course, that is very difficult for a lot of people who say, no, but we are meant to be with God. Maybe, still don't care. That if you look at most religions, all of the judgment is whether or not you deserve to be with God, is entirely in the hands of God. Well, let him do his job. Your job is to be human. So be human and leave the rest of it in the hands of the one who is designed to deal with it. Well, that perhaps endless thought is exactly the kind of attitude you ought to have. It's not about going out to find God. As you say, you're already with God. Yes, that's the attitude you should have. It's about being where you are here and finding that right now, not somewhere else or sometime else or anything like that. So in many ways, that's the big deal in that regard, that we spend too much time looking out. Well, it depends again on what you define as God. And therein is the other thing. One of my favorite arguments with people, even back when I was a monk, was that people would say things like, but God wouldn't do that. Really? How the hell do you know? You've just said that God is beyond all things, and now you reckon you know how he thinks? We make our gods in our image, not in theirs. And therein is the failing, because we make our concept of God as limited, and that's not the point. The point really, I think, is that we must become unlimited, not to take the unlimited and pull it back down to us. And that is, in many ways, I think, one of the difficulties of organized religion. It's it's very difficult to encompass the infinite in a small way. And the problem with being human is that our minds are kind of small compared to infinity. I think to a certain degree that is half true, in that I would say all the gods that we speak of, our understanding of the divine, uh, were all made by us. And that's why religion is fallible. Whether or not there is something out there that isn't constrained by us, by the stories we made of that, um, that's a separate deal to the stories we made. So, yes, we created the stories of God, but they're stories, and they're not the same as God itself. Um, so, when you're dealing with the infinite, how do you explain it in a word? So, I kind of agree with you, and in a certain way, I don't. But to go on the other side of the question, which you asked about in the last live end of thought, um, without consciousness, there is no morality. And I think one of the key points of morality is that it does require us to be conscious. And the more conscious we can become um, of what is and of ourselves, the more moral we are capable of being. But at the same time, because we are people after all, it doesn't necessarily mean that we will choose to be moral. We might choose deliberately not to be. And therein lies the difference, which I think in the modern day everybody has forgotten. We all hear all the talk of human rights, but what we forget is humanity is not a state that is something we automatically have. Humanity is something that we do, and as such, our human rights are predicated off our fulfilling human duties. And you never hear people jumping up and down and shouting, I have human duties, because nobody wants to do the work. But we do. In order to get that consciousness and to get that morality, we have to do the duties. Uh, Something that I've never once heard debated on any platform is the concept of the human contract. Humanity is reliant on contract between us. And that's why we can have morality, and ultimately why we can, at any uh, level, speak of God. We can't speak of God without speaking of morality. So morality comes in conjunction with whatever we understand about the divine. But we cannot have morality without consciousness, and we cannot have consciousness without humanity, and we cannot have humanity um, without the human contract. Well, no, not an instinct. Um, we have an instinct to know of it in a certain respect, yes, but knowing of it is not enough. It's a decision. If I meet you, I have a choice with, if for whatever reason, of either being good to you or bad to you. That's a choice that I must make. And there are many different reasons I might choose one way or another, both good reasons and bad reasons. So morality is not just a conscious experience, it's a conscious action. It's what we do, which is um, far more requiring of us than merely a knowledge. Knowledge alone is not enough. Knowledge certainly is the beginning, yes, without a doubt. Uh, but it's more than just awareness, it's a choice. So consciousness implies choice, and choice implies action. It's what we do. Morality is not an idea, it's an action. You choose to be nice to me or be nasty to me on whatever level. And of course, this affects our human contract greatly, because if I decide you are human like me, then I must treat you like me. But if I decide that, no, you're not human, you don't count, then what I do to you is no longer moral in my view. I can do what I like because it doesn't matter. You're not human. So it's a choice that leads to action. Now, to give an example of what that means, is if I decide that you are not fully human, owning you as a slave is fine. The same way I can own a dog. It's fine. Thank you so much for those likes there. That's very, very kind. So the point that is made is that if I decide you don't count as human, I'm allowed to own you. Nobody says to you that you're committing slavery because you've got a pet cat. But in a great many ways, you treat it like you own it. Oh, it's mine. Yes, I feed it and I look after it, but it must do as it's told, like a slave. I keep a dog because they protect me. They do a job like a slave will. And in return, I feed them and give them a bed. I don't pay them. I do not pay my dog because it's not human. But if it was seen as human, then I would have to rethink the way I treat it and talk about fairness and justice and morality. Because morality is a decision and an action. So it can't just be an instinct. We don't react morally, we act morally. It requires more, which is why babies are not moral, because they are not conscious enough as a baby and they don't know enough as a baby to make a choice and to act on it. Therefore, they cannot be blamed or held accountable. But once you're old enough to understand, to have learned, and are deemed what we refer to as an adult, uh, well, a perfect example, and in fact, one which is very, very reasonable. Um, Two dogs, one bites a child, one protects a child, both made a choice. Does that show consciousness and morality? Yes, it does. And for that reason, therefore, we consider dogs to be more than just an animal. And in fact, funnily enough, I've been learning another language, and the translation of what a pet is in that language is an animal companion. We accept that it's animal, but it's a companion. Therefore, it's not just an owned animal, it's a friend. Certain animals absolutely do show moral choices and are therefore considered to be more than just a thing. And for that reason, people get very, very upset, with reason, if somebody was to eat a dog. No, those are companions. They're not to be used. And I suppose it's arguable that any animal that is sufficiently able to demonstrate choice must be on a level considered to be deserving in that regard of morality from us to them as much as from them to us, because there is consciousness, not merely existence. Now, by and large, something that has no real moral action isn't intelligent enough to make choices, can be treated as a thing. But the moment it begins to make choices and show morality, can we consider it to be a thing anymore? Or must we treat it differently? Morally speaking, I suppose, yes, absolutely that's a thing. And that's really the great struggle of what does it mean to be human? It's not just an accident of birth, not at all. Because I worked as an investigative reporter in the criminal side of things for many years, and I met people that I would not consider human. Oh, yes, they were people, but they deliberately chose not to fulfill the human contract. They were not human. They were sentient, but they deliberately chose not to follow morality or the human contract, and therefore, to me, were undeserving of any human rights because they chose not to be human. And I have known animals that really, truly were so moral and loving and caring. Absolutely, they deserve to be treated as humans because they chose good things and acted on it, and therefore fulfilled what it means to be human far better than some of the criminals I met. So the human contract only exists because there's more than one person, okay? It's between me and others, and it's the agreement to act in a moral manner to each other in such a way that we are allowed to establish rights that protect each other. That's the point of the human contract, that we protect each other, which means that I don't rape you, murder you, steal from you, etc. And in return for my doing or not doing whatever it is, you will act in the same manner to me. And therefore, we can live in harmony at least, and in the best of situations, not only live in harmony, but improve each other's lives as a result of it. Otherwise, it would just be a free for all and may the best person win. Whoever is strongest will take over. And if I Darwin you out, well, tough luck for you, you didn't cut it. And you do see that in many situations in the animal kingdom, where it is instinct, reaction. And the result is that there is no morality in those situations. But dogs and cats quite often display morality. Is it because they have hung around with us long enough and They have learnt the value of it, possibly. Um, but by and large, that same agreement of humanity does not exist in the wild between experiences there. Some wild animals, yes, some don't. It depends on the animal. And wild gorillas, orangutans, and such, absolutely they have morality and care. Elephants, hugely so, yes. Um, so certainly, uh, yes, I've seen elephants do amazing things. I've seen elephants go to funerals um, of their own accord. So they are absolutely greater than, say, a prawn. Prawns do no such thing, and they don't care, and they make no alliances, and they make no friends. So I could claim that there is no consciousness or morality in prawns. And so treating them as nothing more than a creature or a thing, fine. But an elephant, very, very different. So in that regard, we have to accept there is morality and understanding. So yes, which of course also then implies that it is not only us that is important, um, other things as well, and therefore perhaps we are not merely um, an AI simulation for the gaining of knowledge in any manner or form. We are here as beings deliberately and individually, specifically to learn to be here, just as the animals are. And in that regard, perhaps they know better than us because they are what they are. Elephants are very elephanty and they don't pretend to be anything else. So perhaps they are wiser than us in that regard. Um, Perhaps we can learn from them. So there's that side. But then what further does this mean? Because it implies then that our understandings of purpose are perhaps not correct as they stand. Our understanding of religion, what it is meant to be or do, is equally um, incorrect. And perhaps we need to realize then that our aim is not to be the dominant, but to be the most human. And that means doing, which is hard work. So much easier to say that I went to church all my life, I'm a good person, I don't need to do everything else. God will save me and forgive my sins. Lovely, lovely, heaven comes. Whereas if it means that you got to work on being yourself, um, hmm. You think the consciousness is just the process of a collection of senses and information experiences? I'm going to have to disagree with you on that one. Um, I don't believe that, because if that is the case, then it's no more than reaction, and therefore morality doesn't exist, and therefore our only real reasons for being um, is eat, sleep, procreate, eventually die, move on, nothing else. There is no reason. Whereas if it is about actual consciousness, that we have consciousness, then we have a greater meaning, a greater point of being, if you will, simply because of consciousness. that being conscious is what makes it reasonable, worthwhile, and the point. I think that if it was only about action and reaction, and we're just processing, firing synapses, then really and truly, there's no point in being human. There's no point in learning or improving. As long as you make it through to a good old age, you've done your job, and that's it. Thanks very much. Um, it makes being human an unreasonable thing. But again, okay, so Endless Thought says, I know I'm not conscious because I have no clue what's going on. Again, here is a thing. If we are here to learn, one of the rules of learning is to learn what we are meant to learn and how to learn it. Ignorance is not the same as stupidity. Ignorance just means you don't know, but it implies that you could find out. And maybe that's the point of being human, to find out what is going on. Stupidity implies you lack the intellectual capability of finding out, and therefore it's pointless. And that's a very different thing. So I would argue the mere fact that you are aware that you have no clue of what's going on implies that you are conscious and you've realized that there is a clue to be got, even if you haven't got it yet. And therefore, perhaps that's the point. We are attempting to get a clue, which is part of being human. Is that not fair? Thank you so much for the likes there. So if we are conscious, if we have reason for being, then ultimately not having a clue of what's going on is your reason for being. Get one. If you can get a clue, you're then a stage up, if that makes sense. So as we progress through the cycles of being human and we live however many lives we do, we get more of a clue. Have you never met a person that just seems to have their stuff together and really knows what it means to relate to people, to be human, as if somehow they've caught on to something that just makes them that much happier, that much more at peace with themselves? Not that they aren't sometimes happy and sad and dependent on things going on, but there's a peace within them. And it seems to imply that some people have started, at least, to get a clue. And should we get to a point where we have enough of a clue, we can then move on to whatever the next stage is, because we'll be ready. And I then therefore take it back to my point. The whole point of living as a human on this world is that you live as a human on this world as hard as you can, as effectively as you can, because that's what will give you a clue. Maybe. Johan, what do you think? Give a comment here. Is there a point? Are we simply reacting? Do we have consciousness that implies there is more? Okay, that is a great point. But then I would ask you, in all fairness, why be kicked out if not to complete further learning as a human? that you managed to connect because you learnt one aspect, but there's more, that it's not enough to know one aspect of being human because you have a purpose. There you have it. And gaining true consciousness is part of that purpose. You now know there is a purpose. Even if, as you claim, you don't have a cooking clue what it is, you know that there is one, which is a damned good start. Realizing there is a purpose, you can now dedicate yourself to finding out what it is. Is that not fair? And if you have a purpose, you must have a consciousness in order to find. Yes, we do have to play our role as a human. Being human is the point. Um, I think that, again, one of the failings of most religions and of most people is that we assume that being a meat bucket, as you put it, is a bad thing. That somehow we have degraded ourselves to learn a lesson. I don't think so at all. As important as the soul is, I think that the body is equally important. We become greater by the apparent, at least, limitations of the body. But if you think about it, the body allows us to do things that a mind or a soul cannot do, especially in terms of true relationship. The ability just to hold somebody's hand is one of the greatest things ever. And if you had no body, you couldn't do that. Or am I wrong? I think being human is a wonderful thing, an important thing, a great thing, and possibly even a divine thing. And if we were no more, and perhaps this is the story, if you will, of the failure of angels, in that they never were human. They cannot achieve true divinity because they cannot experience what it is to be human. Not meant to know. Again, I'm going to have to argue that the purpose of humans is to be human. We might not think we are meant to know, but perhaps we're thinking about it wrong. The whole point of being human is to be human. Being human is more than just having a physicality and wandering around. As I said, I've met people that I truly believe were not human. They were awful, awful people, and they did not act human, not in any manner or form. And in many ways, we instinctively realize this when, like in colloquial speech, we'll say things like, please don't eat that badly. What are you, an animal? Eat like a human. We're implying something that is within us that says we are supposed to be human, and being human means acting human. It's a doing thing, it's not an automatic thing. You're not born human, you're born a Homo sapiens. You become human. So, in regards the purpose of being human, it's to be human. It's not above our pay grade, it is exactly our pay grade, and we should pay attention to it. Of course, I think that one of the big problems is quite a lot of people don't pay attention to it. We do not laugh in the sunlight. We do not hold hands. We do not treat each other in such a way that there's real connection. We don't do that. And as a result, what we don't do is be human. I had a big argument the other day with somebody on this point because they were talking about war crimes. And I said to the person, there's no such thing as a war crime. And of course, they automatically, yes, I am a little bit pokey at people, but they all immediately said to me, how can you say that when these atrocities happen? I said, no, war is already a crime. It's too late to start talking about war crimes. The fact of war is the crime. After that, it's mere detail. There are no war crimes. Which implies then being human is the whole point. The human contract, which requires choice, not reaction. And it requires a body in order to act within. We're not a meat bucket, not at all. We are a being. And in the advantages of what we generally look on as physicality and limited are because we're not looking at what we've got and what it means we can do, which is so much more and so impressive. We can absolutely, okay, that is a possibility. And it's one which has been posited not once but many times in human history, that the aliens wanted something, needed some kind of worker bee to produce it, and we are that worker bee. We were here. I mean, okay, it's just a story, of course, but it explains the theory. Have you read Douglas Adams' The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy trilogy in 5 parts? Because it was Douglas Adams. In one of the later books, Earth was in fact meant to be a supercomputer designed to figure out the answer to life, the universe, and everything. And humanity was an accident that ended up as part of the program. And that's all we are meant for. We're sort of here to be part of the program for the computer to figure out the great answer because it's coded into what we do. So, yeah, that idea is not new by any manner or form. And of course, you were the one who brought up Göbekli. That's kind of the point of Göbekli, that it is there as evidence that something more and better was here in order to do something, and we are a side result, or possibly the Weckers meant to sort things out so they can come back and get it. And yes, a very reasonable theory in that regard. But is it true? Well, hard to say. Um, it might be an explanation for why, at least in the Southern African alien contacts at that school, they were saying, hey guys, you know, you need to look after the planet and do this, that, and the next thing, because it seems humanity is not doing the job that it was meant to. Hey, you had one job and now you screwed it up, which means that we need to remind you, get on with your job. Don't break the planet. You're getting it ready. For whom? Well, for us. But then, of course, yes, are we merely here for them? In which case, I put it to you, all religion is pointless because we are not the point of existence. Something else is. We're just there to facilitate that something else. We are not the chosen people. We are not the chosen nothing. We are the fleas on the back of a greater reality, if you will. And the aliens are the one in charge. Now, it's interesting, of course, in that regard, because it might explain why so many different cultures across the world that could have had no connection to each other at all have so many similar stories and descriptions of the gods, that the gods or the aliens that came were the ones that moved all over the world doing stuff. And that's why you get pyramids in South America and Egypt and Greece and Russia and. They're the remnants of what we call the gods, or which were actually the alien beings that were here first, and we are what's left thereof. Which means that we need to decide, are we part alien? I could argue that in some of the apocryphal books of the Bible, they speak of the watchers, and they said that when the world was created, the angels were the ones that are here. And hey, Karina, welcome, welcome. Lovely that you could join. When the angels were here, they fancied the human women, and as a result, bred with them, which is one of the reasons why God said, right, all angels back to heaven, which is why the demons who were angels became demons, because they said, no, we don't want to go back to heaven. We like it here. And therefore they were banished to hell. That was the whole point of the argument. And then some of them, which we speak of as the greys, as it were, which we also speak of aliens as greys, they never went to heaven or hell, but hid away and stuck around here. And as a result, certain parts of humanity, how much or which is arguable, absolutely were the children of both human and angel. Only some of them became demons, some of them became watchers because of their disobedience or their turning away. So some of us are part angelic, the Nephilim perhaps, some of us are part demonic, and some of us are part watcher. So you say the pyramids were built by man, but information and technologies were not passed on. It's a possibility, but you have to agree that whatever those things were, that was hell of a good technology. Because even today, we would really struggle building Machu Picchu. We would have a reasonably hard time. Yay, join my fan club. Thank you. We would have a reasonably hard time building the Great Pyramids of Egypt. I mean, there's no doubt. If you look at the undersea city of the coast of Japan, I think it is. Some of those blocks are up to 8 tons. Moving those around would have been a hell of a difficult thing back when they were up on land. And it's pretty sure that they were once on dry land. So, without any shadow of a doubt, whatever those technologies were, they were pretty damned good. I don't know, Karina, what do you think? Pyramids, built by men or built by aliens? Give your opinion in the comments. And anyone else come to that? Give your opinions in the comments. Are we talking alien influence, divine influence? I mean, there's a ton of possibilities, without a doubt. And yeah, I'd like to know what those technologies were. I really would, because the ability to move around an 8-ton block of stone over 300-meter deep chasms through solid jungle, let's be fair, you had to have something pretty good. And yes, they could have had some help, but then the question is, help from whom? Are the gods real? Are aliens real? Were there beings beyond? Now, right there, is a story that fits to some of the apocryphal books of the Bible, because it says there were giants in those days. The Nephilim, who were part human and part angel, were giants. Goliath was one of those part Nephilim. And then in that case, yes, they could have. Are we saying then that because I mean, it's not just the Bible, several other ancient texts speak of giants. Are we saying that they weren't talking mythologically to pass on a story? Were they just saying, yeah, it's like I can say to you, we have cars. I'm not being mythological. There's one in the garden. It's mine. I own it. It's there. So cars exist in this time. Yes, absolutely. Um, Maybe these ancient texts that we don't believe um, were true. Now, here's an interesting thing that might give endless thought theory some truth. Technology lost because of diseases and raidings and such. Important people died off and civilizations crashed. Well, here's a fact, and this is a historical, genuine, scientific, medical fact. Okay? One of the reasons back in the day people had such a hard time sailing between countries was because of scurvy. Okay. The cure for scurvy is quite literally to have enough vitamin C from fruit or whatever. The discovery that having fruit and green vegetables cured scurvy and allowed you to sail further happened at least 5 times in history and was then lost and then found again. And well, then the next group was like, we can sail so far, and then they lost it, and somebody else some years later found it and became the next big ocean going group. So absolutely, as people, once we find a technology or thing, doesn't mean we keep it. In a great many ways, we're a thick bunch. We lose things all the time. So, having found the cure for scurvy didn't mean we kept it. We lost it again pretty damn fast. And that is absolutely true. So your theory of we could have had it and lost it, yes. You say they were more advanced than we think. I think we agree on that. There were certain civilizations that absolutely were more advanced than we think. How much more advanced? Well, that's arguable. And in what ways? That's arguable. Even in the modern world, we know for fact certain countries seem to have greater advances in certain things. I mean, we know that in Japan, their technology in terms of manufacturing and stuff is super advanced. They really are good. But they're not as advanced as America in terms of space. They're the guys who've got the space things going. Some of the greatest medical advances ever in history came from South Africa. It's a fact. So, yes, certain peoples, I'm sure, did have, and advanced enough to do the impossible in certain ways. Yes, I think that's absolutely true, and we cannot deny it. I think that as we go and look at the weird and the wonderful, at a point I've been planning to go and look at ancient technologies, simply because there are. Much thanks for the Rosa. Oh, you're very kind. And for all the likes, guys. That's amazing. But 1000%, I think that there are a number of difficult things. I absolutely want to discuss the Voynich manuscript because it's just so weird. I do want to go further and discuss the ideas behind the possibility of multiple dimensions within the world. I think that's a possibility. And there are both indications in history and indications in science that it's not just a possibility, but a probability, which implies even more. Maybe what we call aliens don't come from outer space at all. They come from here, from alternate realities, which is equally possible. Maybe what we are understand as aliens or cryptids or whatever, what we call mythology is memories of alternate realities that split off from this one, where the stories we tell that are not necessarily true here might be true somewhere else. It's possible. Nick, can I say happy birthday to your friend Liano? Of course we can do that, because after all, we are about being more human, and being human is about relating. So, Liano, friend of Nick, happy birthday to you, and may you have a absolutely wonderful one. And most importantly, enjoy being with friends, because that's what matters. End of thoughts. You say there is only one dimension, everything else is just perspective. No, no, no. We live in 4 dimensions right off bat. We know this. This is scientific fact. The 3 spatial and the concept of time makes 4 dimensions right away. And if you look at quantum physics, they are talking about aspects that can go up to 8 or 9 dimensions, even with our limited science. So absolutely not. We are not one-dimensional, because if we were, we would be a dot. So no. There are absolutely more dimensions, and we live in the four that we understand. Who's to say something else doesn't live in the others that we cannot, as human beings, link with? Is that not possible? So science has already started to realize that what we think of as the world is merely a fraction of what is the world. Fourth dimension is time. The fact that there is a yesterday and there will be a tomorrow and we are going through the now. Time is the fourth dimension. So, now you're wanting to go into quantum physics. The fifth dimension gets complicated, and I wasn't the greatest mathematical student at school. So understanding the science behind quantum physics is bloody hard. I have read several books on quantum physics when I did the study of the philosophy of quantum physics for my philosophy degree, which was fortunately a very small part of it. And if you want to feel your brain start to leak out of your ears, what I suggest you do is you get a book called Schrodinger's Kittens. It's a very famous book on quantum physics, as applied to more than just mathematics. And let me tell you, I reckon I understood about a tenth of what they were even saying. I mean, it really is like blindingly confusing. So I suspect that I am going to be forced to stick around living in the four dimensions we have. The chance that I have of um, dipping into the fifth or higher dimensions is probably fairly limited. And I don't apologize for that because, yeah, as I say, I read the stuff and it was in no way the kind of thing that I could explain. It was a bugger. I did manage because, in fact, my mother was studying quantum physics at one point, and I went and stole her textbooks to have a good old read because she wanted somebody to talk to about it. And yes, we are talking the idea of particle acceleration, acceleration chambers, the concept of the duolocation of electrons within atoms, and so on and so forth. The possibility that, in fact, electrons per se, there is only one electron in the universe, that through quantum physics is in multiple places in multiple times because of the concept of quantum physics. And the idea of translocation of particles, yes, that is where quantum physics comes in. And I remember my mother saying, well, you've read the books. Can we talk about it now? And me going, not up, because I have no clue what they're talking about, but apparently we can teleport. So theoretically, particles can move and be moved using things like the Heisenberg principle and the concept of mirrored charges and such. And they say that white and black holes in space are a demonstration of this, that black holes link up into other places. And just as black holes suck things in, white holes throw things out somewhere else. That yes, it's not just that you can manipulate the fifth dimension from the fourth, all dimensions are intertwined, and we do interact, just not knowingly, because our ability to perceive these other dimensions is limited. So absolutely, and what we consider to be psychic abilities are merely the effect of manipulating the different dimensions in a quantum manner. And if you could understand how it worked properly, you could move through time and space, no problem. That's the theory. Explaining it mathematically requires a brain like I don't have. Maybe Stephen Hawking or Einstein or those guys could give you an answer, but I can promise you that I do not understand it. And I tried. I really did try. It was a bugger. Um, I'm actually now wondering if I've still got a copy of Schrodinger's Kittens lying around to go back and have a read on it. I gave it up and instead worked on societal growth and collapse because that was interesting and I could actually understand what they were talking about. If you're interested in societal growth and collapse, the best book I've ever read on the subject is, in fact, two books written by a chap called Jared Diamond. And the first one is called Guns, Germs, and Steel. And the second one is just called Collapse. And that I understood. Quantum physics, not so much. And of course, the idea on relating it back to aliens, that the way to travel across interstellar distances is exactly through quantum physics, whereby you manipulate both space and time so that instead of being over there, you're over here. And therefore, you didn't need to have all the fuel and all the time and all the effort to transport between. As long as you have sufficient energy to manipulate the different dimensions, you can manipulate matter, time, space, all of it, and therefore travel across the galaxies. That's the theory. So, assumedly, the concept of, and well, funnily enough, the idea of light speed in Star Wars comes from this, that you manipulate time. Speed is merely an effect of time over place. So if you could manipulate time over place via speed and therefore break the light barrier using quantum physics, you could go from here to another planet on the far side of the galaxy instantaneously, which would mean, therefore, as an alien, you could travel. Whether or not you could survive the planet's atmosphere when you arrived there, what is the fifth dimension? Okay, you're asking me about books that I didn't understand that I read maybe 20 years ago. I don't remember which dimension is what anymore. Is life only for the fourth? No, it's not that we don't exist within all the dimensions, it's that we are only able to perceive those four dimensions. We exist within all the dimensions here, and that's why we have continuity. But we are only able to perceive four dimensions. And perception is not the same. Well, I was going to say perception is not the same as reality. However, there was this bugger called Schrodinger and this cat, which puts paid to that argument because apparently, at least, perception does play a part. Not entirely, because width, height, and length is more than perspective. Time is more than perspective. Observation or awareness, if you will, could be the fifth dimension, which is more than one dimension. There is a difference between a dimension and a plane of being. And that we do need to clarify, because we're implying that there may also be alternate planes of being alongside the one we live in the same space due to quantum science. And access to them will be via the different dimensions. Remember that the dimensions that we're talking about in quantum physics are aspects of one plane of existence. And each plane of existence will have all the dimensions. And perspective, I would probably argue, is the fifth dimension, but there may be more dimensions beyond the fifth. And they are not all perspective. That I would argue. So length, breadth, height, 3 dimensions, time, 4 dimensions, perspective, 5 dimensions. I would say it's quite possible that at a certain level, emotion is a dimension. And combined in a way, consciousness becomes a dimension, the ability to comprehend where you are. And all of them put together make up a plane of existence. Of course, this is all theoretical, so I might be talking absolute bull. Possibly. Or maybe I'm entirely correct, in which case perhaps I will link to the greater reality and therefore ascend in my next phase of humanity to something greater. I can hope, I suppose. Whether or not I'll get it is another question. But again, it does imply that perhaps we need to put more credence to the old mythology, that there are clues in there that speak of our existence here and our connection perhaps to life elsewhere, that perhaps it does matter. And the reason that we've never connected to any life outside is because we don't understand enough. If we had a greater understanding of the dimensions that make up the plane of existence that we have, perhaps we would be able to travel there and meet up with them, or exist on a level where we could apprehend them. There's no saying that they live entirely in the same plane of existence that we do. Maybe that's why we never get more than glimpses, because breaking through the different planes of existence requires an understanding of quantum mechanics way beyond what we have, and maybe almost beyond what some of them have. And of course, you say then the rest is perspective. What is perspective if not consciousness? And if there is consciousness, there is choice. And if there is choice, there is autonomy. And if there is autonomy, you matter, and I have to matter to you. And if you look at perspective per se, you say a viewpoint, but a viewpoint is a point from which to view, which implies individuality, which implies consciousness, which implies choice, relating. Therefore, you and I are not the same, should not be the same, and our very differences are valuable in and of themselves, and therefore I must afford you acknowledgement, and you must afford me acknowledgement, and therein we find our humanity. No? It's a difficult one, and I can tell you that I remember one day we started quite deliberately. We had a visiting professor, and he was one of the top philosophers in the world. Amazing guy. Normally, he taught at one of the American universities, but he came to visit, and he gave us, I think it was a 3-month course. Towards the end of the course, we started an argument much in line with what we're doing now. Now, remember, he was not only a philosopher, he was also a priest and a theologian. And all I can say is about 90% of the class simply lost track of even what we were talking about. They couldn't keep up. And the remaining 10% were on such a fine edge of argument that it was almost impossible to even conceive of a conclusion, much less reach one. Humans are primitive creatures. No, I will fight you on this. We are not. We can act primitive. I think we're very advanced. We just don't use our full potential, partly because we won't, because we are contrary little buggers. I think that if we really used our humanity, focused on the here and now to be as much as we could what we are, that potential can, at least in part, be realized. So I don't believe we are primitive. I believe we act primitive, which is not the same thing. And it implies we have a lot of work on being ourself. Being you matters. You yourself, individually and personally, are an absolute miracle of existence. And that is something to be valued and appreciated. You say we're not advanced enough to answer the question. I think we are. I think we don't, which is not the same thing. And that's why I keep coming back to the point that we all keep focusing on something out there, whereas the real answer is in here, and we should stop worrying about out there and focus here. The point of being human is being human. We are advanced enough. We are not primitive, but we don't want to stop and think. We could answer the question if we realized and appreciated enough. I mean, if you really stop and think about the incredible amount of detail in even the smallest part of you as a living being, it's insane. The tiniest bit of you is incredible. And perhaps the real answers have been said to us before in poetry. What was that famous? In fact, I'm going to look it up and read it to you and tell you who was the clever bugger that found it. I forget off the top of my head. Oops. I think some of this answer is literally where did you go? Okay, it's a poem by William Blake. Boink. There we go. Let's find the full one just for you. Full poem. Here we go. Okay, so this is a quote from William Blake's Auguries of Innocence. And it goes like this. To see the world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. Now, they talk about this being a way to express the idea of finding the profound in the insignificant. The only answer you got was stop, you're a human, act like. There's your answer. It is not to say that we find the profound in the insignificant, but that what we think is insignificant is indeed profound. And we are not primitive at all. We are so much more than that. And if we could stop and appreciate it, we would find a great deal of what it means to be human. And in fact, the poem goes on, which has lines such as, a robin redbreast in a cage puts all heaven in a rage. Yeah, we are the ones that limit ourselves, not because we are limited, but because we think that, there you go. You say we are insignificant. No, we're not. We simply think we are insignificant, and therefore we don't achieve what we could because we don't think we are enough to. Whereas if we stopped thinking about whether or not we are able to and just went along and did it, maybe we would not be insignificant. As every night and every morn some to misery are born, and every morn and every night some are born to sweet delight. So some are born to sweet delight, and some are born to endless night. But the whole point behind it is that we make our destiny. Therefore, if we find ourselves as insignificant, it is because we made ourselves so. And should we find ourselves as primitive, we have chosen to be so. Whereas, should we choose to be greater and more, we will be so because we believe we can get there. It's like taking a complicated piece of machinery and using it as a hammer and saying, well, it's not much good for anything else, it's just heavy. Whereas if we looked at what the machinery was and how it works, we might achieve so much more than just banging things with it. Or do you think that perhaps I am wrong? Small but powerful. Who knows what is out there? Well, I suppose um, the answer there would be we need to go and find out, don't we? Size is only important if we let it be. The finding out of things are always possible. We can find huge numbers of things by having an expanded mind, far better than just worrying about, are we physically big enough? Will you let yourself know enough? Is the real question. Um, and I think that's kind of the point. Do we allow ourselves the chance to know more? Or do we just give up? Is it not possible to achieve? I mean, if people said, oh, look, there's sick people. Oh, how sad. Well, they're all going to pass out and be gone. Somebody said, no, 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 no. I will find ways to fix what is wrong, even if it means complicated surgeries, even if it means strange and mysterious drugs that we must figure out how to use to fix that. Yes, we do give up. We give up because we can't comprehend. But if we always stopped when it was hard, we would never achieve. If you don't understand something, you've succeeded in the first step by realizing that there is a something to comprehend. You're already halfway there. Now you know there's something to know. Find out what it is that there is to know, and you've done the next step. And once you've done that, now you can go about learning what you need to know it. Never ever give up. Giving up is failure. But trying and not succeeding is not failure, it's learning. That's the point of being human. Not the answer, but the process of learning. Because in learning, we become more of who we are. And that's a very, very, very hard lesson, I think. Far harder than mere knowledge. And yes, I don't think that one lifetime is sufficient. I think that it requires massive amounts more. I don't know. And Karina's sitting there laughing at me because I'm waffling, and she knows me far too well. We used to have an office next to each other, and we used to talk and shout between the offices. And sometimes I can remember her saying to me, Philip, sometimes you talk a lot of shit. And to be honest, she wasn't wrong. But it was good, nevertheless. Dear. She used to laugh at me arguing with one of the other guys who always used to come up with the weirdest questions. Old Gerard Scarp. You remember Scarp? Karina? He was always such an optimist in so many ways. And our discussions got weird. But yeah, ultimately, after all this time, I've come to think that it isn't my job to worry about God. It isn't my job to worry about what he's doing. It isn't my job to worry about heaven or hell or whatever afterlife there might be there. My job is to be here, to be human, to learn, to discover, to find new things, whether on this planet or others, but to learn. No matter how weird or wonderful it might turn out to be, that's being human. I don't know. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe I'm out of my mind. But that's what I think. And so far, at least, it's kind of working. But with that, we have not even begun the topic for tonight's live, and we've been at this for 2 whole hours. So I'm going to call it a night. And Endless Thoughts, if you can think up some more things to argue over, I would be absolutely delighted. I think we are providing a great deal of amusement for Karina as well. Failing which, we will do the tonight's topic tomorrow, so we can at least go ahead, and it will be aliens, and we will see if we can actually find a reason why we might think that we are connected to, related to, or in fact are aliens as we go along. These are questions which need explicating, answers that need to be given. And we will see if we can find them as we go along. But until then, I will bid you good night. Worker bees building a nest for our creators. I think we are our own creators in that regard. But yes, we are going to have to cut it there. It has been 2 whole hours. We will carry this on. We will take this further without a shadow of a doubt, simply because, let's face it, it's been an absolutely amazing discussion. And thank you so much to everybody that made it so, to you, Endless Thoughts. It's definitely been wonderful. I haven't had so much fun chatting about things in many years. And I hope you have a wonderful night. Thank you to Karina. You are always a pleasure to have on board. And to all of the rest of you guys who joined in, I hope you enjoyed it. Remember, we do our chats at 10 o'clock South African time every night. But that's GMT plus 2. And we love having people coming on and giving their opinions. So do stop by again, and until then, I shall bid you sleep deep, sleep sweet. But of course, sleep with one eye open, and perhaps keep that holy object close at hand. Because you never know. It's quite possible those things that go bump in the night might quite possibly go bump for you.